Welcome to A Fine Revenge, stories of betrayal, payback, and the price of loyalty. Here, every choice has a cost. Subscribe for more. I want to tell you about a Tuesday morning in February. I thought I had everything under control. I thought I saw everything. I was completely, catastrophically wrong. But I wouldn't know that for another 2 months. It was a Tuesday in February. The first light of Dallas stretched across the skyline, pale gold spilling over office towers and brushing the broad avenues below. I'd been awake for hours as usual. My morning run had carried me through the quiet streets of Uptown, past shuttered cafes and the occasional early commuter. Muscles steady, heart calm, mind already running through meetings, filings, contingencies. Always contingencies. Back at the apartment, I went through my ritual. The kettle hissing on the stove. Coffee measured with exacting precision. I prided myself on these small ceremonies, the sound of beans grinding, the hiss of hot water, the aroma curling through the cool morning air. Every motion deliberate, controlled. I believed then that discipline in the morning set the tone for the rest of the day. I still believe it, actually. I was just wrong about what I needed to be disciplined about. Elena sat at the table, her workout already done, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Tablet open, stylus in hand, scrolling through reports for a client. She worked at Harlow and Finch, a reputation management firm that handled several accounts for Mercer Enterprises, the company Marcus and I had built together 7 years earlier. She was precise, efficient, quietly competent. Looking back now, I can see that she was distracted that morning. There was a tension in her shoulders I mistook for focus. A slight hesitation before she responded to my good morning. But I was too busy congratulating myself on noticing the chipped corner of the counter, on observing a pigeon on the balcony railing, on reading the rhythm of traffic below. I thought I was so perceptive. I thought I saw everything. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for months, was that Marcus Aldridge, my business partner, my co-founder, the man I trusted to build an empire with, had already made his first move. Elena told me later what happened that morning after I left. She told me because I asked. Because after everything fell apart, I needed to understand exactly when it started. Marcus showed up at her office at Harlow and Finch around 9. Early but not suspiciously so. They'd been coordinating on the Ridgewood project, one of Mercer's biggest accounts, for weeks. "Morning, Elena," he'd said, slipping in without waiting for an invitation. "I wanted to get ahead on the Ridgewood files before the meeting with our team." She gestured to the visitor's chair. "You're early. Depends on how you define early." That easy smile. That confidence. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. They worked together for almost an hour. Professional. Appropriate. Marcus spread files across her desk, careful to place each one exactly in line with the edge. "I've flagged the discrepancies you asked about," he'd said. "Some of these numbers don't match the previous quarter." Elena had been impressed. She told me that. His thoroughness, his attention to detail, his competence. All the things she thought were my territory. Before he left, Marcus had leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Always a pleasure working with you, Elena. You make it efficient." She'd laughed. "Efficient isn't always fun." "Maybe." His eyes had crinkled at the corners. "But it gets results. That's what counts." When Elena told me this months later, she said she'd felt something shift in that moment. Nothing dramatic. Nothing she would have called attraction. Just a small awareness that Marcus Aldridge saw her as more than a competent contractor from a partner firm. And I, meanwhile, had been at Mercer Enterprises, observing the placement of files on my desk, noting which junior associates walked with confidence and which didn't, cataloging micro-expressions in meetings. Feeling supremely in control of my world. 3 weeks into March, I suggested a working lunch at a downtown cafe. Marcus, Elena, and me. Neutral territory to discuss the Ridgewood project. I thought it was efficient, professional. I arrived last. A client call had run long. When I walked into the cafe, Marcus and Elena were already at a corner table, heads bent over her tablet, laughing. They looked up. The laughter stopped just a fraction too quickly. I noticed that. I remember noticing it. But I filed it away as nothing, just my business partner and a consultant from our partner firm sharing a joke, interrupted by my arrival. "Sorry I'm late," I said, settling into my chair. Client wouldn't let me off the phone. "No problem," Elena said. Too quickly. Too brightly. Marcus slid a menu toward me. We were just reviewing the quarterly projections. We ordered. Started talking business. Numbers, timelines, risk assessments. The conversation I'd planned flowing exactly as expected. Except, I remember the exact moment. Marcus reached for a printed graph, his hand brushing Elena's tablet in the process. Just barely. An accident, surely. But Elena looked up. Fast. Their eyes met. Held for just a beat too long. Then Marcus smiled, small, knowing, and returned to the topic at hand. I saw it happen. But I didn't see it, if that makes sense. "It's impressive, the work you've done," Marcus said, directing his words at Elena but keeping his eyes on the spreadsheet. "We're lucky Harlow and Finch assigned someone with your skill level to our accounts." Elena's eyes flicked to mine. Brief. Then back to Marcus. "I make sure the numbers speak for themselves." I nodded. Agreeable. Oblivious. After lunch, walking back to the office, I remember feeling satisfied. Professional meeting. Productive. Efficient. I had no idea I'd just watched the beginning of my own undoing. Later, much later, Elena would tell me that was the day everything changed. After that lunch, Marcus had texted her. "Coffee sometime?" Just us. No spreadsheets. She'd stared at that message for 20 minutes before replying. Maybe. One word. That's all it took. By mid-April I started to see it. Not the personal betrayal, that was still invisible to me, but the professional one. Small things at first. Marcus taking point on client calls that we traditionally handled together. Minor inconsistencies in reports that traced back to his revisions. A subtle but unmistakable pattern of him positioning himself as the sole authority on projects we'd built as equal partners. I started paying real attention. Not the performative observation I'd been doing before, actual investigation. I reviewed his emails, cross-referenced his meetings, traced the thread of his influence through the firm. And slowly, inevitably, a picture emerged. Marcus wasn't just ambitious. He was making a play for sole control of Mercer Enterprises. Quietly, carefully, using his charm and competence to build alliances, win over clients, and position me as the dispensable partner. I compiled evidence. Documented every misstep, every overreach, every small breach of our partnership agreement. I built my case methodically, precisely, leaving no room for doubt. But I still didn't see the other half of it. That revelation came on a Thursday evening in late April. 6 weeks after that lunch. I'd stayed late, reviewing contracts in the conference room. Most of the staff had left. The building was quiet except for the hum of computers and distant traffic below. Then I heard voices. Oh, intimate. I looked up. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see into one of the smaller offices down the hall. Marcus and Elena, standing close together. Closer than a business partner and an external consultant should stand. His hand on her arm. Her face tilted up toward his. And then he kissed her. Not long. Not dramatic. But unmistakable. I sat frozen. Just watching. Elena pulled back first, glancing toward the hallway. They spoke briefly, I couldn't hear the words, and then separated, moving apart with the practiced casualness of people who'd done this before. That's when I knew. This wasn't a first kiss. This wasn't an impulsive mistake. This was a relationship. I stayed in that conference room for another hour after they left, staring at nothing. Replaying every interaction I could remember. Every lunch. Every meeting. Every evening when Elena said she was working late at Harlow and Finch. How long? Weeks? Months? Did they laugh about me? The questions spiraled, but underneath them all was something simpler, more devastating. I had failed at the one thing I prided myself on. For all my observation, all my preparation, all my careful attention to detail, I had completely missed what mattered most. Over the next 2 weeks, I did what I do best. I investigated. I went back through everything with new eyes. Texts, emails, calendar entries. I didn't need to hack anything. Elena and I shared calendar access. Marcus's emails came through the company server we both administered. The evidence was all there, hiding in plain sight. Late meetings that ran longer than they should have. Lunch blocks that aligned between their calendars. A weekend conference in Austin they both attended in early April, separately according to the expense reports. I called the hotel. Yes, Mr. Mercer, I can confirm both reservations. Let me see. Ms. Rivera checked out at 10:47 a.m., Mr. Aldridge at 10:52 a.m. 5 minutes apart. I hung up, sat very still, added it to my timeline. It had started that morning in mid-February. The early meeting in Elena's office at Harlow and Finch. Then the lunch in early March where I'd been present, watching it happen without seeing it. Then weeks of small moments, brief conversations, lingering glances, the slow build of connection. The first kiss had been after that Austin conference in early April. Elena had told Marcus about her frustrations with me. My emotional distance. My obsession with control. My inability to just be present. Marcus had listened, sympathized, offered comfort that turned physical. By late April, when I'd witnessed that kiss through the glass walls, they weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future. Marcus would take sole control of Mercer Enterprises, the professional betrayal I'd already discovered. Elena would transition Harlow and Finch's entire client portfolio to support him exclusively. Together they'd build something new. Something that didn't include me. I could have confronted them immediately. Called Elena that night. Pulled Marcus into my office the next morning. Demanded explanations. But that's not who I am. For better or worse, and I honestly still don't know which, I needed something more complete. I needed everyone to see what I'd seen. I needed the betrayal to be undeniable, public, and devastating. Elena's birthday was coming up in 3 weeks, early May. She'd already planned a dinner party at her downtown penthouse. Colleagues, friends, people from both Mercer Enterprises and Harlow and Finch. The kind of social professional gathering she loved and I'd always barely tolerated. I decided to make it perfect for her. I RSVP'd yes. Helped with the planning. Suggested the guest list. Recommended the caterer. I played the role of supportive partner so well that Elena actually commented on it. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, she'd said one evening, smiling. But I like it. I'd smiled back. Just want to make sure your birthday is memorable. It would be. Meanwhile, I prepared my case. The professional evidence against Marcus, misappropriated client relationships, breach of partnership agreements, documented attempts to position himself for a hostile takeover. And the personal evidence. The timeline. The overlapping schedules. The hotel records. I wasn't going to humiliate Elena publicly. Whatever anger I felt, I didn't want to destroy her in front of everyone she knew. But I needed her to understand consequences. I needed Marcus to face what he'd done. And I needed to do it in a way that couldn't be dismissed, denied, or explained away. The plan was simple. Let the dinner proceed normally. Create a moment where Marcus's professional misconduct would naturally come up. Present the evidence calmly, factually, without emotion. And then, in the aftermath, mention, quietly, almost as an aside, how interesting it was that his attempts to take over our company had coincided so precisely with his relationship with Elena. The professional and personal betrayals were intertwined. Revealing one would expose the other. At least that was the plan. Elena's penthouse was beautiful that night. Soft lighting. Candles flickering on the dining table. White linens and polished silver. She'd put real thought into it, real care. I arrived punctually, carrying a gift I'd chosen weeks ago, a first edition of her favorite novel, something I'd tracked down through a rare book dealer. She opened it and her eyes actually teared up. "Daniel, God, this must have cost a fortune." "You're worth it," I said. Meaning it. Still meaning it despite everything. For a moment I wondered if I was wrong about everything. If maybe there was still something salvageable here. Then Marcus arrived. I watched Elena's face change when he walked through the door. Her entire body oriented toward him. Like a plant turning toward sunlight. And I knew I wasn't wrong. The dinner proceeded normally at first. Guests arrived. Colleagues from both Mercer Enterprises and Harlow and Finch. A few friends, Elena's sister. Drinks were poured. Conversations flowed. I played my role perfectly, attentive but not overbearing, engaged but not dominating. I watched Marcus work the room with his easy charm. Watched Elena laugh at his jokes. Watched them carefully maintain distance from each other in a way that actually made their connection more obvious. No one else seemed to notice. But then no one else was looking. We sat down for dinner. I'd arranged the seating. Elena at the head of the table, Marcus 3 seats down on her left, me directly across from him. Perfect sight lines. The food was excellent. Elena had outdone herself. Conversations overlapped. Work gossip, weekend plans, someone's recent vacation to Cabo. I waited until after the main course. When people were relaxed. When wine had loosened tongues. The conversation had drifted to work. It always does in our circles. And someone from Harlow and Finch asked about the Ridgewood project. "Actually," I said, keeping my tone casual, conversational, "there've been some interesting developments on that front." I pulled out my tablet. Set it on the table. Deliberate. Careful. "Marcus, I've been meaning to ask you about these client communications." The table didn't quiet immediately. A few people were still talking on the other end. But Marcus looked up. Met my eyes. I slid the tablet toward him. "Elena called 17 times that night." I didn't answer. She showed up at my apartment the next morning. I let her in because I'm not cruel enough to leave someone standing in a hallway indefinitely. She apologized. She cried. She tried to explain. "You were never there, Daniel. You were always 3 steps ahead, always analyzing, always—" God, I felt like a variable in one of your equations, not a person. I listened. Marcus made me feel seen. Not observed. Not analyzed. Seen. I kept listening. "I know that doesn't excuse what I did. I know. But you have to understand how lonely it was being with someone who could read every micro-expression but never just felt anything." When she finished, I asked her to leave. Not angry. Just done. The partnership dissolution took 3 months. Marcus fought it, of course. But our founding agreement was airtight. Either partner could trigger dissolution with cause, and I had documentation of plenty of cause. He walked away with his initial investment plus a minimal settlement. Mercer Enterprises continued under my sole ownership. His professional reputation in Dallas was destroyed. Word spreads fast in our industry, and nobody wants to work with someone who tried to steal from his own business partner. Elena left Harlow and Finch about 6 months after the dinner. The firm quietly terminated their contract with Mercer Enterprises. She took a position at a smaller firm in Houston, far enough away that we'd never accidentally cross paths. Mercer Enterprises survived. I made sure of that. I reached out to every client Marcus had touched, reassured them, strengthened those relationships. Within 6 months, we were stronger than before. I wish I could say the same about myself. Two years later, I can tell you what I learned. Not 7 lessons. Not 10 insights. Just 3 truths that cut deep enough to matter. 1. Observation without empathy is just surveillance. I'd been watching Elena for years, cataloging her habits, noting her patterns, predicting her needs. But I never asked what she actually felt. I never made space for the messy, unpredictable parts of being human together. 2. Control is fear wearing a suit. All that preparation, all those contingencies, all that careful orchestration, it wasn't strength. It was terror. Terror of being vulnerable, of not knowing what comes next, of being hurt by something I couldn't predict or prevent. 3. Revenge doesn't fix anything. That dinner party, perfectly executed, devastating in its precision, it didn't undo the hurt. It didn't restore what was lost. It just created a different kind of emptiness. One where I was right and vindicated and completely alone. I'm in therapy now. Have been for 18 months. Learning to be present instead of 3 steps ahead. Learning to feel things without immediately analyzing them. Learning that connection requires risk, and risk requires letting go of control. It's terrifying. But it's also real in ways I'd forgotten were possible. There's a morning I think about sometimes. Not the Tuesday in February when everything started. Not the night of the birthday dinner when everything ended. The morning after. I woke up alone in my precisely organized apartment. The coffee ritual was the same. The sunrise over Dallas was the same. The balcony view, the polished surfaces, the neat stacks of documents, all the same. But I was different. Hollow in ways that had nothing to do with hunger. Broken in ways that wouldn't show up on any X-ray. I stood on that balcony and looked out at the city I thought I'd mastered. All those people moving in patterns I believed I could read and predict. And I realized I didn't understand anything at all. The observation, the preparation, the constant vigilance, none of it had protected me. If anything, it had blinded me. I'd been so focused on controlling outcomes that I'd lost sight of the relationships that made those outcomes matter. I still live in that apartment. Still wake up early, still go for morning runs through uptown, still measure my coffee with exacting precision. Some habits are too deep to break and maybe they shouldn't be broken. But now, when I stand on that balcony looking out at the city, I try to see it differently. Not as a grid of data points to be analyzed, but as a collection of individual stories I'll never fully know. Not as patterns to predict, but as human beings making choices I can't control and don't need to. It's harder this way. More uncertain. More vulnerable. But it's also more honest. More real. Elena's doing well in Houston, I hear. She's in therapy too, working through her own patterns. I hope that's true. I hope she found whatever she was looking for. Marcus disappeared from our industry entirely. Moved to Seattle, working in tech consulting, far enough removed that our paths would never cross again. I don't think about him much anymore. The anger faded into something more like disappointment. In him, in myself, in how it all unfolded. I'm dating again. Slowly. Carefully. It's terrifying in ways that negotiating multi-million-dollar deals never was. But it's also real. And in the end, I'd rather be real and hurt than controlled and empty. That's what I learned from losing everything. Sometimes the trap you're observing so carefully is the one you built for yourself. Sometimes the person you need to understand most is looking back at you from the mirror.